Hi, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Ryan Pickens.
And we're celebrating. Today is a 2-year anniversary of Smiley Aesthetics and the birthday of Carla and Mary, the co-founders of Smiley Aesthetics. And while we have not been with each other since birth like Carla and Mary have, Dr. Pickens and I have been since the beginning of the birth of Smiley Aesthetics. So what a better time to get on the podcast than today on the birthday of Smiley Aesthetics. So I have with me the man, the myth, the legend, the original medical director and the medical director of state of Tennessee, Dr. Ryan Pickens. Yeah. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your connection to Smiley Aesthetics.
So I am a urologist in Knoxville, Tennessee. I practice at UT Hospital, and that is where Mary did her formal CRNA training. So we met through that, and we also had some mutual friends in Knoxville. And so she worked there for a while, and then she went on to other adventures like most CRNAs do. Working out in the community and stuff like that. And a little over 2.5 years ago, she contacted me, and we met at a Starbucks, and the rest is history. Yeah.
All good conversations can start over a cup of coffee. So tell me about like that initial conversation, because, urologist asked to be the medical director of a mobile med spa. And I just told someone today, no matter how far we go with Smiley Aesthetics, Dr. Pickens will always be golden to us because he's the medical director who took essentially the most unknown risk. I wouldn't say like the most risk overall, because it's the same amount of risk, but the most unknown we're venturing out into this world of concierge, mobile Botox, and growing the business that we have. And so a lot of faith and trust and has gone into this partnership. So tell me about the initial conversation that you had with Mary and some of the questions that you had with her.
Sure. She kind of explained she wanted to get into the, really starting with the Botox business. Me as a urologist, I use Botox for treating like refractory overactive bladder, like when people urinate too much or too urgently and they leak and have to wear pads. It's, one of those embarrassing things. And so I was comfortable with Botox. I've had a few friends that I've known that throughout the years that, they couldn't do their job anymore, and they kind of step into those roles.
Sure.
As a medical director. And so, at first she kind of laid out the business plan and talked about, if it was something I was interested in, would she meet with her and her twin sister, Carla, because they were kind of getting this all started. And so, yeah, I said, I'm definitely interested. And that's how it started. And then things started moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And it is helpful, I imagine, that you already had some type of a working relationship with Mary, so you understood her work ethic, how she is in the operating room. And I know that that's helpful, because a lot of times we get people who come to our training courses. We had a full house today here at our training facility. One of the main questions is, how do I find a medical director? So Mary and Carla both tell people, it's always helpful. Go to the people who know you, who know your work, and who have some faith in you at the beginning.
I would definitely say so. I mean, I don't think anybody with a medical license, when you start talking about malpractice and setting up business and stuff like that, is you're going to want to go to someone who knows your work ethic, knows, you're not going to do stuff you're not supposed to do.
Sure.
They're practicing under your license. And so you're going to, the doctor's going to want to trust you.
Yeah.
And so, having worked with her and knowing how well she did as a student, and then as a CRNA for a couple years, I had that trust.
Yeah. And you said something really important: practicing under your license, not practicing with your license. So that is a huge area of concern in the medical aesthetics industry, because it is so hot right now. Is physicians allowing people to practice with their license, essentially renting it out. and not having the proper supervisory role. So we're on the tail end of Dr. Pickens' tour of Smiley Aesthetics because it's one of the requirements in Tennessee to visit the facilities and to meet with the members who run the facilities to make sure that he is satisfied with those practicing and how we are operating under his license, because we're not allowed to. We're not medical doctors. We can't practice with your license.
Correct. And I mean, I think that's how all this started was, when we were talking, is about how to set this up where I felt comfortable. And so talking about informed consent forms and, training, vetting, injectors and stuff like that. I think that was, as a medical director, was the big thing for me to feel comfortable to signing on and doing this was, what are your ideas about this? Here's my concerns.
Yeah.
Are we going to be pulling just people off the street, and saying like, oh, well, you know how to give people, insulin or something else, that's one thing, but it's a different thing when you have to do these injections that don't necessarily cause, harm, but, they can cause issues. They're cosmetic.
Sure. Yeah.
But, you want somebody that's
still
practicing under your license to know what they're doing.
Yeah, because it's still prescription medicine and still the practice of medicine, and it's still very serious. And like, to your point, it's not like we're performing open heart surgery, but that doesn't mean that bad things cannot happen. I mean, we do not offer IV services, but, there was a death in Texas for someone offering for an IV clinic. Yes. And so it's like, something as simple as an IV, which would be, a no-brainer to a lot of people. It caused someone's death. And people, there's another case in Texas where, because they had proper oversight for the good faith exam, the nurse practitioner caught that the guy was not hungover. He was actually having a heart attack, was able to save his life. When we talked about that a few episodes back, it was a podcast with myself and Kira.
Okay.
And just, something as simple, even though it's cosmetic, even though you've heard me say this a million times, doesn't matter what chairs you use or what music you play or oils you diffuse, like we still are in the world of medicine. And bad things can happen.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not always what you're doing. It's their health conditions.
Sure.
They get in a chair, they start to get nervous, heart rate goes up.
Oh, that just happened today. Mm-hmm. Someone got a patient got super lightheaded, pale. All of a sudden someone was like, let's put a piece of candy under their tongue. Let's give them a full sugar Coke. I heard words that are not in my wheelhouse, but this is what happens when cortisol levels drop, and don't be worried, and let's get them fan on them. And even though that's not a big deal and it's normal, I've fainted from getting my blood drawn before. It's normal. It's still something that you have to know how to deal and handle when that happens in your chair.
Reminds me of Steel Magnolia.
Yeah.
Juice.
Yeah. So you said the training program, it's that was super important to you, that we have only trained healthcare professionals performing services in Smiley Aesthetics, which is one of the biggest reasons that we developed our accredited training program. One of the prerequisites to coming on with Smiley Aesthetics, one of many, is that you have to attend our accredited training program. You have to be Smiley trained, which goes into, that was super important to you. And we are obligated to do the things that you have requested because we're working under your supervision.
Yes. I mean, I think one of the first things Barry said was, I'm going to be accredited as a trainer, so that way everybody comes through here, I'm going to either sign off on, or someone that I've trained that I trust is going to sign off on them. And so that was a big kind of, weight off the shoulders, in a way of knowing that it wasn't just going to be someone, random out in a small town that wants to do this for their friends and
sure.
Says, well, I watched a YouTube video, and so, so
it's actually like a thing now. People are injecting their own Botox, and I see it on the internet.
Oh yeah,
like
the internet.
What in the world? Don't do that to yourselves.
people watch a YouTube video and think, oh, something they can perform complicated surgery.
Clearly, they never cut their own bangs when they were younger. Just because it seems simple on the internet does not mean it is.
Yes. Yeah. Give yourself your own haircut, and you will learn that it doesn't look as simple.
Maybe I shouldn't do this. So let's take this in kind of a down two roads. So because we get a lot of questions that are from our medical directors and from people searching for medical directors. So talk to me a little bit about, if you were, now looking back 2 years, if you were someone interested as a medical professional to get into this medical director role, what are some things that you would look for? What are some things that you would require? Is it as stressful as it seems? If it answer is yes, say no.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, just knowing, malpractice and stuff like that is, you need to have all your boxes checked. My main concerns were informed consent, training, teaching the injectors how to kind of spot troublesome situations they can get into.
Sure.
The patient who seems too intoxicated for informed consent, or someone who, is maybe too unhealthy to have these injections, making people feel comfortable that they can come to me if they have questions. They're practicing under my license, I should be available for them.
Of course.
And so...
And you're, like, by statute, obligated to be available 24/7 in case of an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by statute, if you were going to be unavailable, you have to let us know and offer a substitute for those emergency situations. So, yeah, it's really...
And, I mean, I think that's where one thing I would say is you coming on board and really helping get the legal language down for these consents, and are we following Tennessee law, in my situation for Tennessee law, like, let's follow this to a T. Let's, some people run it loose. Let's run it as tight as we can. So if we ever have a problem, we know we've done everything that we can do.
Yeah.
And I think that was my goal coming on as the medical director, was to make sure that, I was like, let's do it right.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know that we've had a chance to talk about this, but it's like my new hobby, because I need hobbies, I guess. Need better hobbies. My new hobby is driving by med spas and seeing if the medical director is listed on the door, because that's by statute required.
Correct. There's not a lot.
Not a lot. And while that's super small, it's still, it is required. It is required for a reason. You need a medical director, a physician, to be associated with the practice. So when the public comes in, they know who the physician is.
Correct. If you don't have it on the door, you as a lawyer know. If it's not there, didn't happen. If you don't have your coverage, didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so,
and actually, as an attorney, I'm like, so that's spelled out in statute that it needs to be on there.
Correct. So
if you don't have that, what else do you not have that isn't spelled out simple in statute? Like, that's what that automatically makes me think is, is your medical director reviewing all the policies and procedures and signing off on them as required? Not just reviewing, but they're supposed to be jointly made. It's like, are you having your monthly meetings? Or if you're not doing something as simple as putting a name on the door, which is a line item, check a box thing.
Correct. If you're not paying attention to details, they think you're skipping something.
Yeah.
And that's where they start diving.
Yeah.
And so that's what you worry about, because you hear it from, it's like if I'm writing a note about a patient and their age is wrong, it's the first thing on the HPI is usually their age. And if that's wrong, that automatically looks like you're cutting corners.
Yes.
You're not paying attention to the details.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's one of those that I felt more comfortable about this process because every box was getting checked. And so I think if you're going to be a medical director, you got to be that way. If you start cutting corners, then corners get cut, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong, and a lot of people are out of a job.
Yeah. And so tell me about like the actual, you know, there's the liability portion of it. And some states, I've explained this in the podcast before, and on our Patreon account before. So some states are like Tennessee, which says a medical director has to review 20% of charts. It has some additional days requirements, but to summarize, it's 20% of charts within 30 days, a random sampling. And then any chart that needs to be brought to the medical director's attention. So we're talking about 20% just like run of the mill. And then you have those outlier charts. So that's like the short and sweet version of a very long legalese statute. But so some states are like that. And that is similar to a speed limit on a highway, 55 miles per hour. So if you were driving down a highway and you are going 55 miles per hour and you get pulled over and the officer says, do you know why you were speeding, or do you know why you're getting pulled over, Miss Walker? You're like, well, it's not for speeding because I was driving 55 miles per hour. So I know I complied with that, so it has to be something else. In states where that 20% or that chart review requirement isn't completely spelled out, it's like driving down a highway without a speed limit. And so when they say, you know, you get pulled over, do you know why you're pulled over? I was going with the flow of traffic, so I'm assuming that I was driving correctly and I was driving within the normal safe range. I wasn't being negligent, but I don't know that for sure. That's the, you know, what's really important about like the 20% versus it not being spelled out. It's like similar to 55 miles per hour. Like that's not the only requirement you have, but at least we know that that's not, we get pulled over.
Correct.
That's not the reason.
Yes.
Because we're satisfying that, which makes it difficult for some of the medical directors in other states where it's not spelled out. And we have a lot of states where it's not spelled out. It's up to the discretion of the medical director and the APRN or the physician's assistant to set that standard. That becomes a difficult thing to explain because it's not a compliance box that we know is satisfied, you know, and so there is some like increased exposure to liability, but there's a liability component that we will always battle when we talk to medical directors and helping them feel safe and like we are doing what we are supposed to do. But the other component is time. So talk to us about, you know, the time that you spend at Smiley Aesthetics being the medical director. Do you find it to be a lot? I mean, you have a full practice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have a very busy practice. So I think it's more about just kind of managing that time. You know, for signing charts, I have calendar alerts, you know, every 15 days. So I don't get too far behind.
Sure.
Where, you know, it's usually like a Thursday night when usually the week's calming down kind of thing where after I get my 7-year-old to bed, I'll go through the charts and I sign every chart and then look through it, make sure that everything's there that we need for me to sign it. So it just doesn't look like I'm signing charts.
Sure.
You know, we have, you know, Zoom calls and meetings with injectors and where they can ask questions to me, you know, and also site visits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I kind of just plan my calendar where those things are there. So we're compliant with that.
Yeah.
So it's not a, you know, painstaking amount of time or anything like that. It's more just planning and knowing what you need to do and what you feel comfortable with. You know, do you need more site reviews, or, you know, if everything's running tightly and smoothly, you know, you can just stick to the minimal requirements.
Yeah.
But you've got to check those boxes.
Yeah, and we just have systems in place. So when someone decides that they do not want to renew their contract with Smiley Aesthetics, I have a certain email that goes out, and Dr. Pickens is CC'd on every single one of those emails. But in the heading of the email, it says certain language to let him know that like this person is separating just for natural reasons. They decided not to renew their contract. Like nothing really here that we need to talk about. Happy to if you want to, but nothing that you need to know. So the goal is to, you know, try to reach out to him when it's needed, and then to keep you aware at all times of what you need to be aware of, but in a way that you could be like, this is not an emergency. That's not why I'm being contacted. I'm just being informed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get my emails and, it's like, okay, benign.
Yeah.
So
those are the best emails because don't need me.
So yeah, I just think if you manage your time well, it's very manageable.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go to the other side. So I don't find doctors to be incredibly intimidating, but I hear from a lot of people that doctors are very intimidating. And so APRNs do not know how to approach a doctor about being their medical director. This is an actual thing. Is this surprising to you?
Probably. I mean, I can see that.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I guess it's because all my interactions with like the physicians I use, and of course with you, I'm like, I could see myself approaching them, but I don't have any of those, horror stories like you see on House or something. Like I would not want to approach House. Yeah. My medical director.
I don't think I would either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think also being approachable from a business standpoint, also you want someone that's very approachable, that can come in, talk to injectors. They don't feel threatened. They don't, get nervous. They can still, when I watch them do teachings and stuff like that, I don't want them to be like, I'm back there with a, magnifying glass, kind of thing. I'm just kind of like, do your thing.
Yeah.
Act like I'm not here.
Yeah.
Kind of ordeal. But I'm it's a lot to ask. And I'm sure, if I was in that situation too, I'd probably, dial 8 numbers and hang it, a couple of times. Yeah.
What do you think is good? You listed some things. So if I was an APRN coming to you, I don't want you to be my medical director, but I'm coming to you for advice on thinking about approaching Dr. So-and-so. How should I go about the conversation? What should I have prepared? Like questions ready so I'm on top of it. Because I know Mary had answers to almost everything. Okay. So,
and I mean, I've had conversations with now other that have seen what we've done, and they're like, "Hey, do you know anybody?" Kind of like, and that's the thing is, I tell them, I'm like, you need to have a business plan. You need to have, things about malpractice. You need to know like what needs to be there, because that's going to be the first thing they're going to ask. Do you have, I think a big thing is to have some type of legal person on board.
So hard to find.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not acting like I'm a diamond in the rough, but it's just a world of so much gray, and there's just not enough attorneys that are practicing in this area.
Yeah. Business plan, like, is it just going to be you? Is it going to be 5 of you? Is it going to be multiple locations? What all you're going to do? Is it Botox? Is it fillers? Is it Scarlet? All these things that they're going to need to take some time to research them and see. And, you need to know how many legal cases there are of the stuff you're doing in this state. So that's another question. Like, a doctor's going to want to know their risk.
Sure. What
all you're doing. Can you do it? Are you trained? What's your goals and aspirations? Is this going to be something that's going to, what you think their time, per week, per month type thing is going to be involved,
Yeah.
I think those are all kind of important things that as a physician, we're going to want to know.
Sure.
If you just call and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing Botox, would you be my medical director?
Yeah. You don't know where you're getting it from.
Yeah.
Or
yeah. And so, I mean, things come into it like, are you going to be delivering Botox to my office where, where I have to sign for it and you got to come by all the time and, and so things like that. I think, maybe before you go is find a place kind of, if you don't have anybody, is kind of find a place and see how they do it, how, so those answers to those questions.
Yeah, and you're for 2 years into it, and we are still answering questions every single day. But it's, getting the big things answered on the front end. That's just the nature of business. Like you find out questions you didn't even know existed, and then you answer those and you pivot and, all of the things. But those big ticket items, you need to have answers for in the front end.
I mean, I think if you come up with a successful sounding business plan, it's going to be worth their time.
Sure.
Rather than like, you've thought about this, some random Thursday night after 3 glasses of wine, like, I want to do this, and you haven't really thought about it.
Yeah, and what ends up happening is you're going to inject like your circle, so your best friends and family, and then it's not going to go anywhere after that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's things you got to do as a physician. It's like, am I going to spend all this time, talk about all this stuff, and then it's going to flail in 3 months, and then it's just a big waste of time.
Yeah.
So I think coming up with a plan and all that, where they know like, oh, this could be a growing nice little supplemental business venture is going to make them more interested.
Yeah.
And he or she is going to start, asking you questions and, spitballing ideas, hopefully too. And so I think that's how you build that relationship, where that starts the trust and the interest. And I think you want somebody who's going to be not just out on the side, but also someone who's interested in it as well.
Sure. I mean, we just had those conversations at our West location, where we are now, continuing to grow into other states where we don't have those relationships like Mary had with you, right? This automatic trust. So my question to Dr. Pickens is, going back, now looking forward, but you going back, what could we do to help establish those relationships, establish that trust through a demonstration with these new medical directors to make them feel as confident as you felt on day one because of that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're bringing someone in, is to bring them in, show them the operation, show them how you train, show them how, informed consent, what kind of forms you have, and what kind of, if something happens, here's our action plan, kind of thing.
That's huge.
Yeah. And I think that way they meet the injectors and, see them do that. They've had the training that, where you feel confident. I think that helps bring people in that are going to be worth it from your business as well, where, after 2 months, they're not that interested, they're going to quit.
Yeah.
And so you want to bring somebody that, seems interested, because that's where the time is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
I think.
And my next question is probably going to make some medical directors mad, but I see this a lot, where people will say, I will be your medical director for a guaranteed $10,000 a month. And for someone who's starting out, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. And explaining that to a medical director sometimes is really, a potential medical director sometimes really difficult, because you do have those two pieces, the time component, but then the potential liability. And they say it's not worth my time unless it's this. And it's a fine balance, but, it's a fine balance. And I understand where a potential medical director is coming from, but no one starting out can do that.
No. And I mean, I think when we sat down and talked I said, let's give it 3 months, see where things are at, and then go from there. I mean, you got to let the business start off. There's they got to have some money to buy some stuff and, make wherever they're doing it look pretty, look like it's, you want to come in like,
and receive a treatment there.
And receive a treatment. Like, you're like, oh, this is nice. If it, it's a chair and, a lamp is like, it doesn't feel like a spa.
Yeah.
And so,
you don't want to be the medical director doesn't need to be the reason that the business doesn't succeed, because the fee is just so astronomical.
Yes. And I mean, every business starts off slow. So the time commitment at first was nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, other than setting up stuff. But I mean, once they started, at first, it was, sign, 20 charts in the first month. And then,
Yeah.
you know, then you start seeing like, oh, there's a lot more charts that are doing good, you know, kind of thing. And so I think that's important to the medical director is, you know, these, you know, it's always like, oh, 10%, 20%, all this kind of stuff is, you know, I get it. They're using our license and they can't, but you got to let the business get a running start.
Yeah.
And then go from there. You know, I think, and we've been straight, you know, always straight talk about it. And I think that's also important. It's like, you know, we can always look at the numbers again or whatever at certain intervals. But, you know, especially at the start is you got to let them get their feet wet and grow if they have, you know, capital to grow on.
Yeah, I mean, if we can make $400 of profit off of a vial of Botox, some of that needs to go into buying the next vial of Botox.
Correct.
Not just going all.
It's gonna be worth it in the end if you let the business grow.
Yeah.
Where they can make things look nice, get other machines. You know, the more customers they get in, the more people ask like, "Oh, are you doing this?" And it's like, "Oh, we could," you know. And I think, and so. It pays off down the road. And so
For sure.
I think being strict, like, oh, you got to pay me this, well, you know, you're going to bankrupt the business before you start, and then you just wasted time. So.
And that can be, so I have this question asked a lot, you know, how can you work compensation? So one of the things you have to avoid is creating incentives for more profit. So to not get into the corporate practice of medicine. So you can't create a situation where you're fee splitting with a physician. So we split everything we make 50-50. It's like, well, then we're all incentivized to do more, to push more. So you have to be really careful about that. That's not something we ever suggest anyone do, because that gets into some hairy business.
Yeah. And that's where people start doing stuff that shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
Word gets out, and you know, you can ruin your business reputation where it's like, well, they talked me into all this and now I've got all these problems.
Yeah. And so one of the ways that we have, you know, tell people, like, advise people if they're looking at compensation structures is you can pay per chart if you wanted to for the supervision, or you could do a bunch, you know, like once chart review exceeds 50 charts in a month, then we will go up this interval, because that's directly proportional to the supervision.
Correct.
And not the actual, it can't be tied to money. It has to be tied to the supervision, because the medical director at the end of the day is the only one who holds the ability to practice medicine, and no outside influence can come in to mess with that. That's when you violate the corporate practice of medicine.
Yes, and I think when you start pushing people into doing stuff they don't feel comfortable with or feel like they have to do to make more money and stuff like that, that's when mistakes are made, and that's when you know, next thing you know, you're on the front page of the paper, or you're the leading news story.
Yeah.
Somewhere I don't want to ever be. So
The front page of paper, but for like good reasons.
good reasons, yeah.
Well, before we go, I have something that I've done on Patreon a few times. I want to do it here because I'm such a visual learner, and so I hope this is beneficial. I'm going to grab these pins right here just to demonstrate in this little bucket. So I discussed this on one of our weekly injector calls, or monthly injector calls last month. And we have this concept in the legal world that's usually related to real property, and it's called the bundle of sticks, the bundle of rights. And it's used over and over again in law school. So this bunch of sticks represents the bundle of rights that you get when you receive a physician's license in Tennessee or in any state, but we're going to go with Tennessee for right now. And this red one will be the practice of medicine. So I'm going to hand these to Dr. Pickens because he's the physician. Okay. So when you're setting up an agreement with someone, with I'm an APRN, not really, but we're going to pretend. I'm an APRN, and that's a scary day. And so we're setting up an agreement. And so I would like to be able to do good faith exams under your supervision. Is that something that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So he hands me one stick in the bundle. This is the stick that says that I received delegation from Dr. Pickens to do good faith exams, and that my license, I'm eligible to do good faith exams.
Correct.
He can't hand this stick to the janitor. My license, not only does my license have to allow me, but you have to delegate it to me. So the question is, we get this often. Now I want to hire people and I want to supervise them. I don't have yet the ability to supervise other people. You have not delegated that to me. We haven't had this conversation. It isn't in contract. We don't have policies and procedures in place. So, and one we didn't do is I would actually like to not only do good faith exams, but I would like to inject. So create the treatment plans, do the good faith exam, and inject. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Don't give me that red one. That's that's the practice of medicine. Okay. I have another one. So now I would like to hire someone. So I would like to hire an RN. So the method I have, my business plan, I'm going to do the good faith exams. I have all the intake forms, all of the consents. I'm going to create the treatment plans. And then the RN is going to do the injections according to that treatment plan. Would that be okay?
She trained?
Yeah. Okay. What type of training? So these are the questions. It's like, what type of training does she need?
Has she been through the training thing? Does she understand the informed consent? Does she understand,
No, actually, she received her RN, but she's only been working as a receptionist since she got her RN license, so I guess that's a problem. These are the questions that I need to ask. Like, just because he gave me the ability to do good faith exams and to do the injections does not mean that you delegated to me the ability to bring on someone and supervise them under your license.
Correct.
And then you have these conversations of what policies need to be in place and what needs to happen. If you want to start offering training, like I want to open up, like you saw today, I want to open up a training facility and bring in 8 people. He still holds that, all of those pins. And again, the one that he in Tennessee can never delegate is the red pen, which is the practice of medicine. There's nothing I could ever do in Tennessee. Other states are full practice states, but in Tennessee, there's nothing that I can do to get the red pen from
Correct.
Pry it out of my cold dead hand. And that's a really big point. And that's why what goes back to what we just talked about with how you compensate physicians. You are compensating them for this exchange and for holding that red pen. And maybe you all are watching that and like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But I am such a visual person because we get questions from our injectors like, why do we have to do this in a good faith exam? Because Dr. Pickens gave me this pen, marker, color pencil, whatever it is. He gave this to me, and he told me that he would only give it to me under these circumstances. Just like I didn't get the pen for hiring someone because I didn't have questions. I didn't have answers to his questions about are they trained or they whatever. I didn't have answers to that. Correct. So you didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
But you gave this one to me under certain circumstances. Because he gave it to me, guess what he also can do? Take it back. And that's what I tell our injectors. Why do you have to do this? Because Dr. Pickens said so. The end. And he gave us this pen and he can take it back. So don't want to hear any lip. But that's all, being funny, but it's so important to this world of medical aesthetics that we often overlook because it's just Botox. It's just filler. It's not really practicing medicine. And until laws change, it is.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
And I just get to be the Debbie Downer for everyone. But at least we try to tell some jokes while we do it.
Yeah.
So.
We're not taking you to Disney World.
Yeah. I do not get to go to Disney World. Well, thank you, Dr. Pickens, for being here today, being on this 2-year journey. It's been a pleasure. And it's
been a fun ride.
Yeah, we're going to keep on trucking, but first we're going to go have a celebratory dinner.
Yeah.
So thank you all for watching. I hope that you found some value in this. If not, don't let us know. But if you want more information, or more content like this, check out some of our other podcasts. Follow us over on Instagram, specifically Mary and Carla. They put so much stuff. Injector Smiley is Mary's, and then Carla's, I think, is C Smiley. I don't get paid for this. I don't know. This is not sponsored. But most it falls on our Patreon account. That's where we post a lot of this content, and I go into some of, the random things about the law and walking people through how to find certain regulations in their own states and what that will look like throughout, navigating their government website, because it's often very difficult. So our Patreon is at Smiley Aesthetics. Thank you so much, and we will catch you next time on Not Just Lip Service.